Day 1244 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So, starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently, Russia sits on more than 1,043,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,170 in the past day. Then as for hardware, 2 tanks, 7 APVs, 54 artillery, a rocket launcher, and 1 air defense system, which would appear to present an undercount as of now for these systems, given a string of recent events, but further verification efforts are warranted on some occasions. Now to the map, where an unyielding successive wave of new nightly UAVs flew over the Ukraine-Russia border to Saratov, Smolensk, Lipetsk, Tula, Bryansk, and most notably, the following 2 examples. Firstly, in Rostov, where a Ukrainian drone strike targeted the Kamenolomny railway station, a location very closely bordering occupied Luhansk, causing explosions and fires at the scene, damaging a critical logistical hub for railway military equipment transfers. The attack, which also impacted 2 adjacent buildings, has delayed 26 trains. Most perplexing, however, is the reason given for the event, with the local Russian media reporting that the cause of the incident was due to friendly drones, quote-unquote, at the Rostov railway. So, in the past, we've heard of attack drones and we've heard of friendly fire, but never friendly drones, as Russian media is clearly sometimes at a loss when it comes to sticking to the evolving Kremlin narratives, leading them to, in this case, put a positive spin on a bad situation. Good for them. But it's all a reflection of the bizarre and twisted logic stemming from a regime built on false narratives that projects strength by downplaying events, because when you start invading your neighbor under completely false pretenses and where they successfully fight back, that's when the strangest of rhetoric starts to emerge. Meanwhile in Russia, and all the way over to the Sakhalin region, with an event involving what's reported as the longest coal conveyor in the Russian Federation, stretching 23 kilometers, that caught fire. Now, this event only happened several hours ago, so there's no word on the cause yet, whether it be smoking Sergei or sabotage. More likely than not, though, it skews towards another preventable industrial accident, resulting from a technical failure, given the vast distance away from Ukraine. Even though, these days, there is a non-zero chance now of a Ukrainian-made spiderweb Operation 2.0, if you will, as a means of putting on display that Ukraine can strike energy assets anywhere at all found on the Russian map. Next on the map, and back to Russia's western front, in a manner of speaking, as Ukrainian drones were wreaking havoc on Moscow, marking the 5th consecutive night of strikes. Russian air defenses are in full swing, or partial swing, with loud explosions reported across multiple districts of the region. Airliners were once again grounded, halting all flights and leaving passengers stranded, but for this occasion it was impossible to ignore what was happening, which is where Moscow authorities claimed to have intercepted 2 drones. And so to take a more objective look at these types of activities now, there are several reasons for this Ukrainian strategy of flying consecutive nights of UAVs into Moscow. First, the aim is to overload Russian air defense systems while simultaneously identifying their weak points. This in turn helps Ukraine to determine and prepare safe corridors for potential major strikes in the upcoming future, especially because you might recall that General Freuding, the German general, who often looks like he's either about to tell a joke or just told a joke, who has confirmed that German-backed Ukrainian-produced long-range missiles will soon be striking deep inside Russian territory, and promising a late July arrival. So these existing drone salvos are essentially laying the groundwork for those upcoming strikes, helping to map out the battlefield and identify the most effective missile routes. Now to the Ukrainian map into Sumy, with 2 different types of updates speaking to the same outcome, as the map has now updated to remove the Russian occupying presence in Kindrativka as part of these slow, conservative map updates. And then related to this, reports surfaced on Ukrainian forces now liberating the settlement, and in doing so, linking the areas of Kondrativka and Andrivka. As part of these updates, the final operation was said to have eliminated the last remaining Russian groups in Kondrativka, with Ukrainian troops continuing their offensive northward. This strategic gain marks a significant consolidation of control for Ukrainian forces in the area, disrupting Russian positions and potentially altering the dynamics of the conflict in this northern sector. As such, it all underscores how Russia's Sumy push, launched just last month, has failed to generate lasting momentum. Intended as a show of strength and to weaken Ukrainian forces, it has instead exposed poor intelligence and planning, putting on display yet another political miscalculation for the Kremlin and their Ministry of Defense. Next, and headed down the map, where the Pokrovsk sector was the most notable area that Russian activity could be found today. With, zooming into the map, slight consolidation around the northern contact point and the capture of a former grey zone garrison just below that. Also for Donetsk, and worthy of a mention, a Ukrainian Air Force MiG-29 Fulcrum dropped a US-manufactured 500-pound JDAM ER guided munition on a Russian position, an event which helps go some way to show that there is now becoming this increased rate of Ukrainian air support runs along the Eastern Front, a zone that, until now, has seen relatively fewer of these compared to the north and south, quite likely made possible by Russia's thinning air defenses in the region. Next on the map, and to the south, as soldiers of the 128th Mountain Assault Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine liberated the western part of the village of Kamyanska on the Zaporizhia front. This previously battle-hardened brigade was deployed in the successful Kherson counter-offensive operations of the past and is now only recently being deployed to this sector, already with success, indicating they will deliver more successful counterattacks here into the future. Then to reporting from around the map, and where the Russian Mr. S 152mm self-propelled artillery systems really look to be in full swing, sent out to battle to seize the Russian day. But where another has now been destroyed, all captured in footage by the occupiers themselves, the Russian army is going to need another resupply of these SPGs to come in from the Far East for the chance for us to get to see a great deal more of these specific outcomes. Reason being, and off the top of my head, this accounts for the 11th destroyed out of the dozen or so Mr. S howitzers previously seen coming in from the Far East through Siberian rail around 6 to 8 weeks ago. Then also on the map, Ukrainian soldiers from the 425th Skala Regiment repel a Russian infantry assault said to be around the southern Zaporizhia front. So here we see zero armor, zero deflection capability, with infantry inbound through a wide open main pathway, with that tree line doing very little if anything to obscure their movements. All in all, taking the very audacious Lemmings approach here. Now headed across to some news updates, and after Ukrainian President Zelensky announced recently that Ukraine has proposed a new round of peace talks with Russia for next week, Moscow appears unwilling to budge from its maximalist demands. Kremlin spokesperson and Putin toilet seat sanitizer Dmitry Peskov has now responded, emphasizing that Vladimir Putin remains focused on achieving his goals in ending the war in Ukraine, but expressed it by way of Peskov stating, quote, "Our goals are clear, and the main thing for us is to achieve our goals," echoing the Russian government's ongoing and unrelenting stance. This rigid approach reflects Moscow's list of demands presented in its so-called peace memorandum during recent negotiations with Ukraine in Istanbul on June 2nd. According to those documents, seeing the light of day in the last moments before that meeting, lists that Ukraine must recognize Russia's annexation of Crimea and of the 4 partially occupied but fully annexed regions of Kherson, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Luhansk. Additionally, Ukrainian troops would be required to withdraw completely from those regions willingly cede land and demobilize, while also dismantling and destroying all Western-supplied weapons as part of any ceasefire deal. In other words, Russia's peace plan is to demand to render Ukraine defenseless, which, if this laundry list of demands was hypothetically agreed to, it would very clearly signal an impending further invasion by Russia, because it's easier for them to do so, aiming for nothing less than total Ukrainian capitulation. One would hope that most would see that as extremely obvious now. Then to more news, and where the deteriorating relationship between closely neighboring Azerbaijan and Russia continues, and now with fresh accusations that have emerged from Russian state TV claiming that Azerbaijan aided Ukraine in sabotage strikes on Russian military bases during the June 1st Operation Spiderweb attacks, with Azerbaijan calling the claims absurd, which all comes as its president, Aliyev, grows increasingly vocal against Moscow. In a speech at the Azerbaijan Media Forum, Aliyev told a Ukrainian journalist, "I have only one piece of advice for you: never agree to occupation and do not surrender," quote unquote. Following this, tensions between the two countries of Russia and Azerbaijan are further inflamed by an unresolved incident. You might remember the 2024 December time, in fact Christmas Day, it was, downing of an Azerbaijani passenger jet. Aliyev has publicly slammed Russia's refusal to admit responsibility and is now preparing to escalate the matter to international courts. For Moscow, the deterioration of these relations signals a loss of influence in the South Caucasus, and it also undermines Moscow's energy leverage for the region and exposes its slipping grip over the post-Soviet sphere. Or more simply put, making enemies at the worst possible time. Also in news, another Russian general, Alexander Kornev, has died under suspicious circumstances. He was the commander of the 7th Airborne Division, a unit involved in a series of war crimes in Kherson and the Zaporizhia regions. According to the official Kremlin account, Kornev died of cardiac arrest, but there are suspicions that his death may have been orchestrated or linked to internal Kremlin conflicts, or possibly retaliation for his alleged involvement in war crimes in Ukraine, which has happened a handful of times before, inside of Russia when commanders were not at their post. Then headed across to more news, and with too much Russian economy news to go around these days, I'll quickly round up the video with a couple of quick takes. Starting off, Russia is facing its worst agricultural collapse in decades, and farmers are no longer keeping quiet. Wheat yields have plummeted by over 60% in drought-stricken Rostov, with agricultural emergencies declared in 10 districts. Rising input costs and interest rates are making production unviable nationwide, with many Russian farmers now abandoning farming entirely, cashing out their positions rather than holding out for market improvements. Apart from Stavropol's strong harvest this year, the exception due to better rainfall, market fluctuations and price inflation are taking their toll. Potato prices have tripled in Russia, which has already previously led to Putin strong-arming Belarus to increase their exports to Russia, and in doing so, leaving Belarusian dictator Lukashenko to declare, he actually declared, his country was out of potatoes. But the real kicker here would be that the Kremlin's reliance on grain exports for short-term cash, done so to boost their finances, which has cost long-term food security. Russia's farming sector isn't just struggling, it's bleeding. And then lastly, for economy news, job cuts loom in Russia, with 11.5% of companies planning to reduce staff this year, nearly double from previous figures. Salaries are also set to fall for the first time, as the share of enterprises planning to increase wages has dropped by 13 percentage points. The anticipated salary increases have also shrunk, signaling a significant downturn in the labour market. This is quite the market turn as well, because the new trend marks the end of the so-called wage race, which previously saw increased wages in Russia due to severe labour shortages. But now the tides are turning, as the workforce faces a perfect storm of deteriorating conditions, painting an even bleaker future for the Russian workforce. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks so much for watching, sticking around. I really appreciate all of your support, really helps keep the channel going, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!